Okay, new week, new topic. Let's get into it. I may have talked about it before, but like so many times we've talked about so many things, so I can't keep track, and you can't keep track either. So that's pretty sweet for me. That means I get to just repeat the same content over and over again, and you just keep watching it and enjoying it. Nice. What we're going to talk about today is essentially belief systems, or just kind of like attachment to ideas and beliefs. I guess is kind of what we're talking about today. And what I've seen and what I think is personally the best way to kind of go about it. And it usually, you normally kind of see people talking about, and by belief systems, I mean, beliefs about, all sorts of things from like religion to just like their interpretation of the world and stuff like that and how they see things working. So I think the best way to talk about it is like, you have people like your existentialists who, think that, okay, and I guess it really our thinking and logic here can really pertain to something like philosophy because, you have many schools of thoughts and it's broken down by also East and West and stuff like that and all sorts of different interpretations of, life and what it's all about and what it all means. But what can we take from it? And I think that's the most important part is I think it's not about getting too attached to each one. So take the existentialists, for instance, they think in general broad terms, what their point is like, you're not brought onto this world with a set purpose, but you determine your purpose through your existence and what you believe is like meaningful to you, and like that it becomes your purpose, and like through you existing and through you exerting yourself through finding like doing what's meaningful to you, that's where you find your purpose and like happiness in life. And I think I think there is a lot of merit to that point, and I think it's something worth considering. But then you have all sorts of other kind of schools of thought and of philosophy when it comes to things like, you have your absurdists and stuff like that. And it ranges, and there's like, East, like I said, East and West and philosophy, you got like Buddhists and stuff like that. You can normally always tell because they tend to be an ist of some sort, like a Buddhist or existentialist and stuff like that, or absurdist. All of those things are different realms and schools, but in my own kind of journey, what I think is most important is to not be too attached to any single one of them. Because I remember because I went to a Catholic school in Australia, and one of the things one of my religion teachers, I think it might have been maybe what year would it have been? Maybe year 11 or 12, my religion teacher, because going to a Catholic school, you had to take religion as one of the subjects at school because, you got to select preferences for certain ones that you wanted to do. But unfortunately, everyone had to do, well, not unfortunately, but, just the way it is, everyone had to do religion. But the great thing that one of my religion teachers told me, Mr. Carroll, he said, fundamentalism is the natural precursor to extremism. So what he's saying to that is, if you believe something too strongly, like if you're too black and white about things, it will eventually lead to, extremism of some sort. And that's when you look, a perfect example is, religion throughout history, where, be it, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, doesn't matter, like, or Buddhism or whatever. It's like, it doesn't, or Hinduism, it doesn't matter. Like, if you're too strict towards the scriptures and or what the, or to really any sort of school of thought, you'll end up seeing the world in this kind of black and white, where a lot of it is more gray, and there's a lot of, nuance to things that aren't always easily captured through the paradigm or lens through which that philosophy looks at the world. And the way I think you supplement that is, I think that's where it comes to reading a lot about other kind of like cultures or philosophies and ways of understanding the world. Because even that's the thing, like different countries, just due to their cultural makeup, have very different ways of looking at things. And, some of them you can obviously say are wrong. So like, female, like forced female circumcision, and so I believe so, is like, in some cultures is something that's just like, culturally done, which I think most human beings would probably just go, yeah, probably that's a little bit messed up. But, but that's just one example. But there's all sorts of other things where it's a lot more, gray, where it's not as. Or I guess you could just go straight up murder. Like murder, I think pretty much every culture can kind of agree is, a bad thing. But, those are ones that are usually pretty easy ones to identify. But even in those cases, it's like, you don't want to get trapped into those spaces. But a lot of the interactions that people would find themselves in would be in that kind of like gray area and stuff like that. But you don't want to, like I said, be too rigid in how you view things, because if you do, well, that's when you can kind of, get into kind of heated arguments. And at the end of the day, it's just like, when you get into those kind of very heated arguments, and you can see it at the moment with the whole repealing of Roe v. Wade. I'm not here to, obviously I'm someone who thinks that, abortion is something that any woman should have access to, and, and can choose to like access it, especially. And I always love the cognitive, maybe not the cognitive dissonance, but just like the mental gymnastics that like pro-choice people have to make when it comes to things like, oh, well, what if it was rape or incest? It's just like, well, like I saw something recently. It was like there's an Arizona primary, like, which is kind of like an election for the state and stuff like that. And they had a panel of Republican, potential candidates, on, and they were kind of doing an open forum, kind of like, moderated debate, or at least discussion and talking through. And it was just hilarious because, I mean, there was 4 of them in total. 3 of them were just complete nut jobs, like absolute straight off the deep end, just crazies. And the only one that was like semi-reasonable, who in many respects is still a horrible person in a lot of respects, is Elizabeth Cheney, which is Dick Cheney's daughter. She was the only reasonable human being, because all the other 3 were like, oh, the election was stolen and all that, and just believing that kind of nonsense. And she's just like, no, I don't believe that it was stolen. Like, we lost. Like, it's just a reality. It's like, there's checks and balances on these things. Like, we've been doing elections for a long time. You can't steal an election. It's not possible. It's like someone, like, it would get caught. Someone would slip up. But these people wouldn't talk about, like, wouldn't accept that. But one of them was talking about, like, pro-choice and stuff like that, and, like, the abortion stuff. And she was asked, oh, so you'd be, because her point was, oh, I believe in, life is, from conception to death, life is existing, right? And then the moderator goes, oh, but what about in cases of like incest and rape and stuff like that? And she was like, oh, well, that's an individual thing. That's a personal thing that's a personal choice for a person to make. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, that is ridiculous. Like, it's a personal choice for a person to make. It's like, yeah, so let the person choose that choice. And don't repeal Roe v. Wade, because then that gives them that choice to have that personal choice that you just talked about. But here we go again. Like, people too attached to a belief, so they're just gonna do mental gymnastics to make the world fit. The circle to make the circle fit the square. They're just gonna kind of force it through mentally, just to like kind of get their own monkey off the back. But yeah, I guess that's the point I'm trying to make. It's like, don't get too attached to any sort of major belief system or philosophy. I think what's important is to take the things that are good and work from each one, and then supplement that from each one to kind of make your own system. And that's what I've kind of learnt from my own experiences. So that's why I do recommend, like, obviously reading a lot about philosophy, because you can learn a lot about how people think from different cultures and different places, and also different times. Different times and different generations, and you can see the different lens through which a lot of people look through the world. And I think the more that you can expand that, and the more you are open and willing to look at things, not necessarily from an accepting viewpoint, like, just because you understand something doesn't mean you have to accept that something's right or wrong. But to just understand it, at least what is being brought forward, but not being too rigid and unwilling to accept changes to your own systems of belief, because no system of belief or philosophy is ever going to be perfect. There never will be a perfect one, just because there's always changing circumstances, and life is always constantly evolving and becoming more complex. And as we've seen in the past recent decades, life is becoming way and way more complex, and that just adds new and newer, more and more layers of kind of moral ambiguity to things, where like no singular philosophy will ever be able to keep up, and also to be able to catalog every sort of kind of possible interaction. I know you could say, oh, that's unfair because they're more like guidelines, but then that's what I think they should be, is guidelines. But I think people will then take them too far and make them rules, strict, hard and fast rules, where yeah, maybe they are more like guidelines, and it's more about taking this mesh of guidelines and seeing what works for each situation. But that's my thought. Food for thought, I guess. So if you could subscribe and just be a doll if you could, and subscribe and like and share and do all that fun stuff down in the comments, I would greatly appreciate that, because I feel like this channel is going in the right direction. And I think the more we get people on it, and the more we can kind of get an ecosystem going around this channel, I think the better it is. Because although I'm bringing forth like what I can to the table and for the viewer for you, I think once we have a kind of community going, there will be that cross-pollinating dynamic where users and commenters and people within the audience can help one another and provide insights on things that even maybe I don't even know or haven't heard of, or need some more reading up on. So that's what I really want to create this into, which is like kind of a system and community for people around the world to connect and kind of just improve their lives, and try to hope to improve the lives of those around them, and overall make the world community a better place. So yeah, if you could do that, I'd greatly appreciate that. Thanks.